Born in 1984 on the planet Krypton, the child of Laura Lorvan and Jor-El, Kal-El was only an infant when his father predicted their planet was almost certainly doomed. Jor-El tried to flee to the Phantom Zone with his family, only to be repelled by the Kryptonian prisoners held there. With no other choice, Jor-El placed his son in a prototype rocket, activating its brainiac intelligence and sending it to the planet Earth. The crash site was discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent, who took the infant in, leaving behind a stillborn calf at the landing site in order to ensure the government wouldn't go looking for any survivor of this alien wreckage. They raised the boy as their son, Clark Kent, teaching him their values and ideals, before eventually revealing his true origins, leaving the growing young man to decide what to do with this information on his own. Clark grew older, living a happy and loving existence while adapting to his phenomenal power, gifted to him by the energy from Earth's yellow sun. He sparked a serious relationship with a young woman named Lana Lang, with whom he spent a lot of time discovering his powers. During the night of Clark's prom, Jonathan and Martha were killed, perishing in a car accident. After their funerals, a mournful Clark Kent gave the Kent farm away to a family friend in need, whose family had recently lost their own home, and Clark Kent moved on to Metropolis, intent on becoming a journalist. He got a job at the Daily Star working for editor Perry White, where he met coworkers such as photographer James Olsen and reporter Lois Lane. Outside of this, Clark began to dabble in vigilantism for the first time, rescuing a handful of people, including a number of survivors of the zero-year disaster in Gotham City, and wearing a series of t-shirts with an S emblem fixed to them. He gradually became a public figure in Metropolis, and eventually earned the moniker of Superman, one of the first superheroes to emerge in this world. However, early on in his career as a hero, the Man of Steel was captured by the government, and the powerful, well-connected businessman known as Lex Luthor. With the Kryptonian rocket Kal-El had arrived on this planet with at hand, Luthor began to torture Superman for information. The hero managed to escape and steal the rocket away, though DNA samples acquired from Superman allowed Luthor to construct a number of clones because of this event. Before the rocket was taken by Superman, it had emitted a signal, attracting the attention of the Collector of Worlds, a sinister being that infects the infrastructure of worlds before stealing a city from the planet. On Earth, he would attack the internet, but on Krypton, he attacked a network known as Brainiac. Revealing to have stolen away the Kryptonian city of Kandor and stealing away parts of Metropolis, this collector tried to force Superman to decide between the two settlements. Instead, using a Kryptonian armor from one of the bottled cities, Superman vowed to protect both. He defeated this being and restored the part of Metropolis that was lost. In doing so, he became a hero to the people of the city, while he reprogrammed the Collector's ship into becoming his Fortress of Solitude. It stayed in orbit around Earth for some time, with Kandor kept there until it could be freed. Eventually, this fortress was moved to the North Pole. Not long after this, Superman met Batman for the first time while the Man of Steel was investigating a series of murders committed at Wayne Enterprises. But their memory of the event was ultimately wiped. It was not until an invasion by the forces of Apocalypse that Batman and Superman would first truly work together. This event was a full-scale attack by Darkseid, ruler of Apocalypse and powerful new god, and he nearly overran the entire planet. Superman was captured by Darkseid and taken to Apocalypse, rescued by Batman in a daring mission, while a group of other prominent superheroes stayed behind to protect Earth. Together, the two escaped Darkseid's hellish planet before they returned home to help the others. Superman was able to knock Darkseid through a portal created by the hero Cyborg, ending the invasion and saving the world. The heroes involved in this event were personally thanked by the President of the United States for this, and the gathered heroes decided to become a team to protect Earth against threats they could not handle individually. David Graves, a historian who witnessed the invasion firsthand, would ultimately come up with a name for this team, the Justice League. From here, Superman began operating as a hero in force, while dealing with the challenges associated with preserving his secret identity. At one point, he had to publicly kill off Clark Kent to avoid suspicion, and the whole incident was only resolved once a fifth-dimensional imp rewrote reality to undo the entire affair. The Daily Star was bought out, becoming the Daily Planet, and due to changes in company philosophy, Clark Kent quit, becoming an independent blogger. Meanwhile, Lois Lane, who Clark Kent was interested in, had begun dating someone else. Superman later met and would work with a teenaged, half-human clone of himself known as Superboy, as well as other Kryptonians that survived Krypton's destruction, such as Kal's cousin, Kara, who adopted the identity of Supergirl, and a Kryptonian named Hel. The latter, despite his bid to revive Krypton, threatened to destroy Earth's entire solar system in the process. Hel was only stopped by the combined efforts of Superboy, Superman, and the Justice League. The Man of Steel would go on to battle and defeat a number of other enemies, including a beast called Wraith, the powerful telepath known as Hector Hammond, and the monstrous being known as Doomsday. His growing animosity with Lex Luthor only grew worse, as the man sent kryptonite-enhanced soldiers to kill the Man of Steel, while Luthor began rising in both power and popularity. Meanwhile, Batman and Superman kept working together, forging an alliance of deep trust in one another. Superman also began a romantic relationship with Wonder Woman, and the two powerful individuals began working closely together while falling in love with one another. Later, the Man of Steel got caught up in a battle with a number of other active Justice League rosters when a being called Pandora had approached the League. During this incident, known as the Trinity War, Superman accidentally killed Dr. Light. A despondent Clark turned himself in, where it was discovered the death was the result of an accident. Microscopic samples of kryptonite had somehow found itself in Superman's brain, creating instability within the hero. Before Superman's allies could act, however, it was discovered that this was an intentional act from Atomica, a spy working on behalf of the crime syndicate, an evil and corrupt version of the Justice League from another universe. With Superman incapacitated by this kryptonite, these villains invaded Earth, only stopped by Lex Luthor and a band of native criminals. They saved Superman, and Luthor, enjoying the feeling of being a hero, offered to save the life of his one-time enemy, to remove the kryptonite from his brain. Having discovered Batman's secret identity during this entire event, Luthor managed to use this information to blackmail himself a spot on the Justice League. Superman later discovered the villain Doomsday on a rampage. Learning it harbored a dangerous virus, Superman ripped the monster in half, using his super breath to inhale the toxic substance, protecting anyone else from being infected. Kal-El was not so lucky, and he began to transform into a creature resembling Doomsday. Though Wonder Woman tried to help him, Superman could not stop the transformation and was locked in a special facility. When the Teen Titans needed his help, he was released and decimated their foe. The government declared Superman an enemy in response to this, sending villains such as Metallo and Atomic Skull. Superman was helped by a fellow superhero named Steel, but a suicide attack by Metallo left Superman weakened by the kryptonite infused in that villain's body, accelerating his transformation into a Doomsday-like being. Losing control, Superman was able to help the Justice League fight off another Brainiac invasion, only for him to completely succumb to the virus. He was only saved at last minute by Lois Lane, who helped Superman use Brainiac's technology to cure himself of the Doomsday virus. The hero took Brainiac and sent him into a black hole, leaving Earth for 2 full months, during which Superman was confronted by a being called the Brainiac God, and would later witness the convergence event with Supergirl as a result of this. Upon his return home, he took up his old life, resuming his relationship with Wonder Woman and once again focused on helping others. His blog, which had languished in his absence, was left abandoned, and instead he took his old job back at the Daily Planet, only for things to go awry. After an encounter with a stranger named Ulysses, Superman's powers began to fail. Superman was also alarmed to find that his public identity as Clark Kent was exposed to the world, this time for good. When the Justice League became embroiled in a war between Darkseid and a being called Mobius, Superman's powers once again faded away on the world of Apocalypse. Luthor dropped him into the pits made of solar energy in an attempt to restore the hero, and Superman was corrupted by its negative power. He slaughtered a number of parademons before turning on Luthor, torturing the man before abandoning him on the harsh world belonging to Darkseid. Though he returned to Metropolis, he could sense his broken psyche and realized he needed help. He returned to the conflict and was able to expel the evil energy in a battle against Mobius. Though the Justice League ultimately proved successful in protecting their Earth, the experience did catastrophic damage to Superman's body. Now, with barely any superpowers at all, Clark did his best to operate as Superman, though he faced many challenges with his secret identity now being public knowledge. Eventually, during an attack from Vandal Savage, Clark grew so desperate to get his powers back he exposed himself to a great deal of kryptonite. Though this worked in empowering the superhero, it seems this was the final act needed to push Clark's already unstable body towards a complete and total failure. Following yet another devastating battle, this time with a being who was once worshipped by the Kryptonians as a god, known as Ra, Superman came to the dark realization that no matter what he did next, he was going to die. In an attempt to come to terms with this, he decided to get his affairs in order, first seeking out friends and those he held dear to his heart. He started with Lana Lang, making it clear that he wanted to be buried with his adopted parents. He then revealed everything about himself to Lois Lane, asking her only to publish his information after his death. He sought out Batman to help him find a successor, and the two agreed to seek out Supergirl for that very purpose. Next, he told Diana everything as well, and they spent a moment together before they were called into action once more. A strange man of energy resembling Superman named Danny Swan attacked another version of Superman who had apparently survived from an older timeline and escaped to this Earth with his family. His wife, Lois Lane, also of another world, and their son, Jonathan. With Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Steel, and Batman, the two Supermen confronted Denny, who was preparing to release a massive amount of solar radiation. Given that he was dying, Superman of this world voluntarily flew Swan up into the sky, and when he exploded, the hero did his best to absorb the resulting energy. Though successful, it was too much for the dying Kryptonian, who fell back down to Earth. Surrounded by friends, family, and the woman that he loved, Kal-El said goodbye to all of them, before the hero died, his body disintegrating into ash after a flare of energy. The other Superman from the other timeline eventually agreed to replace the Superman of this world, after Lex Luthor took up the name Superman for himself in honor of the fallen hero. Yet a number of questions remained about all of this. A new, seemingly powerless version of Clark Kent emerged after this event. And though this was useful in easing back now public knowledge of Superman's real identity, the other version of Superman and Lois Lane were disturbed by this mysterious happening. To make matters even more concerning, the Lois Lane of this world disappeared with the Superman of this one as well, apparently dissolving in the same energy that Kal-El did. The Kent family eventually learned that much of this was the result of an old enemy of Superman, another fifth-dimensional being known as Mr. Mxyzptlk. This being revealed that the two versions of Superman were actually one being, split in two by a mysterious force meddling with the timeline of Earth. The same thing happened to Lois. In confronting this extremely powerful imp, Lois and Clark were merged across both timelines, meaning the new 52 version of Superman, and all the events surrounding his life, have been incorporated into the current version of Superman and his timeline. As such, the current version of Superman is as much this version of Superman as the one that had grown a family and been living and hiding on this Earth for years. Now merged, the family moved to Metropolis and resumed a life together in relative peace. Facing many villains after this, Superman was eventually confronted by a being that had been plaguing him for months since he had taken over and resumed a public life with his family. This being, known only as Mr. Oz, had taken intense interest in the entire Kent family, often manipulating events to his own mysterious purposes, such as through the use of the villain Doomsday, who had mysteriously reappeared, or destroying a cybernetic version of Kal-El's biological uncle. It was only at this point, after months of this mysterious behavior, that Mr. Oz had finally revealed himself to Superman, after causing a number of disasters on Earth. Mr. Oz shocked Superman with his true identity, that of Superman's biological father, Jor-El, taken away from Krypton mere moments before the planet was destroyed by the same mysterious being mentioned by Mr. Mxyzptlk. Jor-El was irrational, insisting on Kryptonian superiority, and outraged at Kal's apparent affinity for what he viewed as inferior beings in the human race. When Superman destroyed Jor-El's staff, it appeared to clear the man's head, and he briefly came to his senses, only for him to be ripped away by the same mysterious force as before. Superman was able to confirm the nature of these events thanks to a time-traveling mission with Booster Gold, where he witnessed a timeline where Krypton wasn't destroyed, as well as Jor-El being taken in his own timeline moments before the planet's destruction. The Kent family was then approached by Jor-El once more, this time with the man seemingly much more stable. He wanted and insisted on helping John, who Jor-El had taken an interest in and desired to help the boy discover who he is by traveling to the galaxy with him. John, worried about a future timeline he had learned about from a time-traveling Tim Drake, agreed to go, worried about the kind of person he might one day become. Lois and Clark were understandably worried and not exactly eager to trust Jor-El, so the man offered all of them to come along. Superman, unwilling to leave Earth behind, reluctantly consented to Lois and John going on the journey without him. Though they left behind a communicator, it was destroyed shortly after this, and Superman hasn't heard from the family since. Kal-El later investigated some fires only to learn of an attack on the Fortress of Solitude. The entire complex was destroyed, including, much to Kal-El and Supergirl's dismay, the bottled city of Kandor. This devastating loss was at the hands of an alien named Rogol-Zaar, who claims to have destroyed Krypton and is intent on wiping out all Kryptonian life. Superman and Supergirl teamed up to defeat this being, but even with the Justice League's help, he proved a powerful individual, and Superman knew this being would stop at nothing to destroy every trace of the Kryptonians, including the Earth itself. Kara and Kal managed to send Rogol into the Phantom Zone, but it appears the alien was able to quickly escape through another portal immediately after this. Supergirl set out to find answers while Kal remained home to protect Metropolis. Before she left, however, with the Justice League, a mournful vigil was set up for Kandor. Not long after this, a boy reported in to the fire department. He saw who was starting the fires for himself. He doesn't know why. He thought it had to be for good reason, but according to the television, it's not. But he saw it with his own eyes nonetheless. Superman started those fires. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and thank you for watching my origins and bio for the New 52 Superman. So this is another step in our little train of Superman-related bios that I have planned. There's only 2 more left after this. The next one's a really big doozy, and the last one's a relatively light one that should be a pretty fun way to close out this series. But this was one that I think was a long time coming that a couple of you correctly guessed was next, because I'm going in the order that these characters were more or less published in. We're in a very new era of Superman history with this character. He is, after all, a very modern take on him, but I have to tell you, I kind of like the setup on the whole. It's an interesting character more than it isn't. There's aspects about New 52 Superman that kind of work best as an origin story, relative to some of the more dated stuff from the New Earth origins that had been established in the 1980s. Of particular note is the change to Krypton itself, which is generally seen as a more humane society than the one that had been depicted in earlier iterations of Superman. Whereas older versions of Krypton were sterile and emotionless, this Krypton seemed to have love in its world, and it makes the loss of the planet that much more tragic because of it. It also gives meaning to the change that happens going forward with Jor-El and that sort of stuff. And I have to tell you, I really like the way Superman is currently, with the amalgamated timeline across the 2 iterations of the Superman chronology. We essentially get the best parts of all Superman canon over the last few decades, more than that at this point. So it's hard to object to that in any meaningful way. Anything you like about Superman is pretty much in the character at this point. The Silver Age Superman was already amalgamated into the New Earth Superman, and that in turn was reconciled with the New 52 Superman. So he's this big character that represents decades of superhero content, ideas, and changing norms in society. It works pretty well, especially since Superman has always been pretty consistent in what he represents. A story of an immigrant coming to this world and finding a place here, ultimately being the best of us because of it. It's a good story. and they preserve that spirit in the New 52 Superman. Where it's lacking and where it's a real issue is the consistency with the rest of the canon. It's very cool seeing a new Superman getting started in the world, helping out during the 0 year, and learning to meet these other superheroes and work with them. Except the story and the whole New 52 is only halfway committed to the idea. That time jump is where we really get a problem. I love the stuff that takes place before it, where we get to see the Justice League coming together. Grant Morrison, of all people, gets to sort of rewrite Superman canon, and by and large, he does a really good job with it. But then we have to jump forward in time to compensate for the fact that so much stuff was kept in canon with Green Lantern and Batman. I get why they didn't want to restart all of that. It would have been a huge pain, but unfortunately, the halfway commitment to this really messes around with Superman's character. Because it feels like they want to have a new Superman dealing with the problems in a new way and starting fresh in terms of how he encounters all his villains and stuff like that. That's not a terrible idea in and of itself, but it's at odds with the rest of the canon when Batman becomes so much more experienced because of that, even though Superman is supposed to be the first superhero to have emerged in our world. But in spite of all that, it still goes in some pretty interesting directions. As we get into a powerless Superman and the whole Doomsday virus thing that preceded it, we're getting some very interesting colors with this character, and he ends up having a very moving and sad death. Where it goes forward is interesting, but we sort of lose aspects of New 52 Superman because of that, including the relationship with Wonder Woman, which I'm kind of looking back on with a bit more affection now. I don't know why exactly that is, maybe because it was different and it was kind of cool to see them explore that. I really like the idea that when they were flirting with Lois Lane ending up being Batman's love interest and Wonder Woman being Superman's love interest for a time in the New 52. But ultimately, Superman having a family is way more interesting anyways, so they kind of move the story forward in the right direction. I think it's kind of a lesson that you really can't run away from progress after a while. You cannot consistently reboot a character without the good things about character development slowly seeping in. Original Superman didn't have the Fortress of Solitude, Candor, and all those other little features that were added over time, like crypto and that sort of thing. But inevitably, they come to be expected out of the modern version of Superman, so that stuff has to be introduced one way or another in Superman canon. Personally, that's another weak aspect of it. I liked it when the Fortress of Solitude was more just this thing that Jor-El sent with Kal-El to Earth, the last refuge of Kryptonian society. The whole Brainiac ship thing is kind of interesting, but yeah, you can kind of tell they've moved on from that by now anyways. And then we get into the Bendis stuff, and I have mixed feelings about it all. I would feel a lot worse about it if Bendis hadn't assured us that he didn't shelve John and Lois permanently. They'll be back, and he's made repeated claims that he actually likes those characters and understands how important they are to Superman canon, so they're just away. Destroying Candor and the Fortress of Solitude feels like it's trying to be a big moment. It's trying to make that Rogol Zal guy memorable, but I didn't even say his name correctly there, did I? Because he's a completely forgettable villain, no matter what he does. It has to do with the design of the character and what he's all about, and none of that I find terribly interesting. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully Bendis has more and better ideas prepared for Superman. He was never great at creating villains anyways, so maybe he can work better with existing Superman villains in the future. Who knows? I will tell you this though, the stuff late in the game with the New 52 Superman, and early in the Rebirth game with Dan Jurgens writing Superman from the older version and then the amalgamated character, that stuff kind of sold me on the character in a modern sense in a big way. Some of the best Superman comics I'd read in a very long time, and that really, means something to me. So if you're looking for recommended reading, I'd start somewhere around that whole Doomsday virus story and just keep going forward, because it gets pretty great after that. Although, like I said, that early stuff with Action Comics in the New 52 era by Grant Morrison were pretty damn good too. It's kind of easy to overlook that stuff, but he did some really cool stuff reimagining the series. and the artwork behind it is very phenomenal too. So, that's all I really have to say on the matter. But thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of New 52 Superman in the comments section below, and we'll see if you guys can guess what's next for Superman canon. I will tell you that the character is kind of bigger than just his time spent as Superman, so I'm going to make an origins and bio corresponding to that. That is bigger than just Superman. So it's going to kind of increase in scope ever so slightly before we end things with a character that's only ever been Superman. And that will have been all 10 versions of the character that ever really existed in main canon. So thanks for joining me on this little journey. It's been very fun. I've learned a surprising amount considering I thought I knew quite a bit about Superman canon, but it's amazing the stuff that comes up, even in a character like New 52 Superman. Little details that I missed across the 5+ series that he's involved in kind of sell me on the story a little bit better. Yeah, if you like Comic Island, be sure to check out our Patreon page. This whole Superman series was the result of a Patreon-based poll, so it's a cool way for you guys to be involved in what kind of content we make. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.